found it very interesting collating and collecting all of these slides, which have come from different presentations that my team and I have put together. One thing I'll say before I start, I'm presenting a lot of work that was not done personally by me. I am part of a really, really awesome team at the Fitch Group called the Emerging Tech Group. And a lot of the work I'm presenting is thanks to all of the great people at that group. Okay, without further ado, let's jump into it. So a little bit about me, and why do you want to listen to this guy on the camera right now? So I've been doing some form of data science and analysis for roughly the past decade. It started while I was still doing grad school at Georgia Tech. And then most recently, I've been in the financial services domain, where I've been putting to work a lot of the skills that I've gathered on NLP, machine learning, data analytics over the past decade or so. You can see there some of my experience, some of the previous places where I've worked. And as I said, education, I did a PhD and a master's at Georgia Tech, and I'm originally from Puerto Rico, born and raised. So I went to the University of Puerto Rico, where I also studied engineering. I did a bit of a career shift, originally from structural engineering into now the tech industry and data science. So if you're interested in knowing any more about that, or in asking me any questions about that journey, feel free to follow me on LinkedIn. I'm not sure the slides will be distributed, so I can also put my LinkedIn information in the chat. Okay, so with that, what are we going to talk about today? So here's the content. I'm going to talk about hybrid intelligence, and what do I mean by hybrid intelligence exactly, and why do I think it's important? Now, this presentation, it's going to be practical, but I also want to answer a philosophical question around where is AI headed? There's a lot of talk about artificial general intelligence, artificial super intelligence. Where do I think we stand on that? Where does the audience think we stand on that? And hopefully by the end of this seminar or webinar, I'll ask that question, and some of you can revisit some of the assumptions that you had about that idea, and whether AI will take over, will it always continue to be a tool, or will it be, as I think it's the current best approach, hybrid? I'm going to talk about some practical applications, some stuff that we've been doing at Fitch, some of the business value that has brought to the company and to the teams that have partnered with us, and then I'm just going to recap and leave some time for Q&A. I also wanted to mention I will stop a few times during the presentation and sort of open up the floor to questions. So if you have any questions along the way, please feel free to add them to the chat. All right, jumping right into it. So intro and context. I do want to talk a little bit about the Fitch Group. What is it that we do? Where do we operate? How do we operate? Who are our clients? So that you understand why some of the concepts and applications that I'm going to talk about later regarding machine learning are important. So number one, Fitch Group. It's composed of two sub companies. Fitch Ratings, probably the most well-known one, but also Fitch Solutions. And you'll see, if you look at this table, and if you look at the mission statement for the Fitch Group, is we want to be the people whose analytics, products, and insights support efficient capital markets and help drive sustainable economic growth. If you look at the left side and the right side, they seem very similar. The main difference that I want you to remember is Fitch Rating is regulated by entities like the Securities and Exchange Commission in the US or the European Securities and Markets Authority in Europe. That means that there are certain metrics and criteria that the publications Fitch Ratings creates have to abide to. Fitch Solutions does not have those requirements, but obviously we want to provide good insights and good research, because otherwise, the customers will go to the competitors. Why do I want you to know where Fitch is located and roughly how many people we have and how many entities and countries we serve? For a very specific reason. Some of the things I'm going to show are covered very generally across the data science sphere. And one of the things that I want you to remember as I'm talking through these topics is these problems are very different at scale. if any of you are familiar with language models, retrieval augmented generation using language models, maybe you've even done some work using retrieval augmented generation. It's very different to use these models with data sets that have a few dozen documents as opposed to thousands or even hundreds of thousands of documents spanning many, many, many years. And although they are in different industry verticals, they are all talking about financial information. And that's going to be very important in a little bit, and you'll see why. So what do I want to do today? I want to take you through a week in the life of an imaginary analyst that we're going to call Pedro for the rest of this webinar. So what does Pedro do during his typical week? This is very representative of what Fitch itself does. You have to source financial documents. You have to get the data from those documents. Then you have to use that data and peripheral information, industry information, your own knowledge to do research, do analysis, and then you want to publish that analysis for your customers to use or to provide credit ratings, which again is regulated. I am purposely going to go broad in this presentation. So I want to achieve two main things today. I want to talk you through everything that we do with AI that helps your favorite analyst, Pedro, do his work. But I also want to get your opinion. I want to do a follow-up to this presentation. So I want to get your opinion on where would you like for me to dive deeper? Maybe during the Q&A, maybe in a future presentation, whether it's another webinar or it's one of the conferences for ODSC. All right, let's get started. Hybrid intelligence. What do I mean by hybrid intelligence? To me, it is the recognition that AI, as it stands right now, works best in collaboration with humans. That doesn't mean it's just a tool for us, for users, for data scientists. It means we literally collaborate. The human is also a tool for the AI. We want to mix the strength of AI and the human mind to achieve outcomes that are better than what either one could do separately. If you look at these two tables, what are some of the things that AI is good at? What are some of the things that humans are good at? I'll give you a few seconds to read through these 4 bullet points. And as you're reading through them, the thing that I want you to think about is, do these seem complementary? And to me, they are complementary. So I'll just give you one example. AI is really good at processing large volumes of data as long as it's seen similar examples of that data in the past. Humans can't process data that fast. We don't have that throughput that AI has. But we can extrapolate and we can expand our understanding of certain areas to other areas that we haven't seen before. We can look at complex data sets where it's not obvious how the data relates to other pieces of the data. So that's where we can complement each other. Okay, so I am gonna take a quick minute here, and this is a stopping point. Before I dive into the actual applications that we are working on at Fitch, do I have any questions? I'm looking at the chat and I don't see anything yet. Lauren, if there's some questions that I just don't see, please let me know. Otherwise, I am going to continue. All right, so going back to the week in the life of Pedro, this is basically going to be our home base for the next 20 or so minutes. So again, like I said, we need to start with sourcing some financial information. Without information, we can't do any work, and we also can't really use AI because AI relies on data. So financial doc sourcing, what have we done at Fitch to source financial documents and to help the company source financial documents? Fitch, right now, the data operation teams processes approximately 100,000 documents every year. So you can imagine that takes a lot of people. And historically, all of that processing was done manually. A large part of it is still done manually. We've automated roughly 15 to 20% of the full financial document processing at Fitch. That means there's still quite a bit that is done manually, and there probably will always be a lot that is done manually because, like I said in the previous slide, AI needs to have patterns, and it needs to have substantial data in order to perform well. And some of the document sets and document types that we source just don't have enough to justify being able to train machine learning models and to use machine learning models. So for the 20% that we have automated, the actual sourcing of the data itself, we do it via a combination of processes. So the data is available through APIs. For others, we use RPA, which is basically you automate your way through the UI and you do the same steps that a human would do manually, but you just automate it. We can also take manual uploads, but then the interesting one to this particular audience is web crawling. For web crawling, we have developed some machine learning models in order to understand whether a document is relevant or not. I'm not going to spend a lot of time here because this is not the most interesting of the AI workflows that we do, but the thing that I will mention is, even in this relatively simple workflow, we have a human in the loop. This is still a hybrid system. If you look at the very end over here, we have our data ops staff. After these documents go through binary classification, where we're using some specific features to determine whether the document is relevant or not, and the ones that are irrelevant get discarded, we still have people checking it because you might get a false negative. You might also get a false positive, and you don't want that false positive to make it into your data set only to find out later that you actually don't need it. Like I said, won't spend a lot of time on this one. I'll get to the more interesting bits. So after we're done sourcing these financial documents, what's the next step? So the next step is we have to actually extract data from them. And this is where the real interesting bit comes in. For this webinar, I'm going to use as examples public companies, because I think a lot of people can relate to and understand public companies, but just know that this is one part of many, and this is one type of many sources of financial data that Fitch uses. We also look at bond issuance, loan issuances, government, corporates, financial institutions, et cetera, et cetera. Now here I'm looking at McDonald's for no particular reason other than this was available in the data set that I was looking as I was preparing this presentation. What am I showing you here? So on the very left, you have a 10K. This is an annual report that McDonald's has to submit per SEC regulations every single year. That report contains tables. We have developed models that can detect where those tables are. They can locate the tables. They can find the information on those tables. But it's not enough to just find the information on the tables, because that's not what your favorite analyst, Pedro, has to look at. Pedro actually has a series of metrics that Fitch has put together, that these are the ones that we care about for rating whatever entity it is that we're looking at. And what does this actually look like in production? So if you remember what I showed a couple minutes ago, we have our document sourcing components, and this is all in production. This is running live. It's as we speak. This is running every single day on Fitch systems. Everything here in a red box, it contains some kind of machine learning component, either ones that we have trained ourselves using our own labeled data, or something that, or ones where we have used pre-trained models to obtain this information. So I'll walk you through the process. And again, the thing I really want you to remember is we have the human in the loop. We have that component that makes this hybrid. I'm going to show you a walkthrough video in a couple of minutes of what this actually looks like on the platform that, if I was an operator, the one that I would be using, and where I can edit, fix, or improve and enhance any of the data that I've gotten from the machine learning models. So these documents, they can either be PDFs where we can directly read the text, or sometimes we get image PDFs. If we get images, we have to do OCR. Regardless, once we have that text, like I said, we have to detect where tables are located. These documents contain structured data. They also have unstructured data. Again, I'll show you an example in a minute. Once we know where the tables are, we have to understand what does the table structure look like. Obviously, it has rows and columns, but those rows and columns are not uniform. The SEC, continuing to use public companies as an example, requires you to report on specific financial metrics regarding your company, but how exactly you show those metrics is up to you, within bounds, of course, but not every company reports the same way, which is why you need a machine learning model to be able to identify what do these tables look like. After you've identified the tables, you have to classify them. Why? Because not every table is relevant for financial analysis. And after you classify them, you need to detect the periods. Usually these tables, the columns have different years. So if you're looking at a 10K, you're looking at all the financial information for the current year or the year that has just been reported on. But then you also have columns for prior years. So let's say if you reported on your financial performance in 2023, you will also have prior 2022, potentially 2021, maybe even 2020. It depends on the company. After you've understood what those periods are, you have to extract the data. And finally, it's not enough to extract the data. Like I said, Fitch has their own formats that they want to spread the data and formalize and calculate the data, because those are the things that are relevant to either produce a credit rating or to do the research and provide insights that our customers need. Once we're done with all of that, again, here comes the human in the loop. At any step of the process, I can check, is this information correct? And if it's not correct, I can fix it. I can send it back to the data extraction component. I can send it back to any of the table machine learning components. If it's correct, and once I finish getting it to our service level agreement, which internally is very, very high, it's over 99%, then I can send this information over to the Fitch data repository. I can send it to some systems that we have that are called the data marketplace. And there's also some downstream notifications, reports, and alerts that go either through email to downstream users, or they can go to via Kafka, for example, as events for some downstream applications. I believe this is the first, okay, yes. So now we're gonna do a demo, and I'm gonna show you what does this actually look like. So this is something, unfortunately, this is not live. This platform does have some proprietary information. So last night, I recorded this, cropping only to the parts that I'm allowed to show an external audience. I'm gonna hit play, and I believe this is playing at 1.25 speed. So what do we have here? All the way to the left, this is the Fitch template. This is the information that Fitch analysts care about. Over here, we have the document. What you see highlighted here in either purple or green, this has been automatically detected by a machine learning model via the series of steps that I showed you earlier. As a user, I can come in here and I can check what is the text representation of all of these template fields that I have here. And if I click on one of them, it highlights it in green, which makes it really easy for me as a user to be part of the system. Again, this is the hybrid component that I've been talking about. I can also click on the values itself, and it'll show me where the value is. If I need to edit the value because it's incorrect, I can go ahead and do that. Let me pause for a second, because again, this is playing at 1.25 speed. So faster than I was talking to myself last night as I recorded it. This is just an example. This is a McDonald's annual report from 2019. All the way here, if I have the current period, I can specify that here. If I have the previous period, that'll get specified in this column, and I need that because a lot of financial analysis is understanding trends. It's not really understanding where the number is today, it's where the number is today relative to where it was some time ago, depending on what period you're looking at. So here, I think I just showed an example of how I can edit the data by clicking on a different field. I'm gonna move this along. Oh yeah, here. So I'm just showing an example of how I can highlight the rows that were detected or take them out in case I need to look at some other data, for example. And this is all part of a tool that we have developed in partnership with other teams that work with us. Here I'm showing many other examples of tables. And one of the things that I wanted to say for the end, and this is very important, the machine learning models don't always get it right. This particular series of models here for this type of document, at the moment, it's performing at about 80% F1 score. For those of you not familiar with F1 score, you're basically looking at a ratio of your true positives, your false positives, and also your false negatives. It's a number that goes from 0 to 1. The closer it is to 1, the better it is. And it's a better measure compared to accuracy, because accuracy only tells you what you got right versus wrong, whereas the F1 will tell you, did you get it right because it was a true positive, or sorry, did you get it wrong because it was a false positive or because it was a false negative? If you remember, there were many steps in the process, so there's many ways of getting it wrong. Here I'm showing where the table, the table structure model did not get the structure quite correct. This column header here should have been merged, but the ML model did not merge it. So I, as a user, can go ahead and I can merge these columns, and I can just repeat the process with these and repeat the process with these. And now this serves two purposes. This goes into the system correctly identified, so any downstream users are looking at correct data, but then it also serves as training data for the next round of training and improvement and refinement of these ML models. And finally here, I can go ahead and click yes if I want to transfer this to our Fitch data repository. Okay, going back. All right, so we're again back in the week of the life of Pedro. So now that Pedro has the financial information that he needs, what is the next step here? Well, he needs to do research and he needs to do analysis. How are we helping Pedro do research and do analysis? Great question. So what we have here is a platform, and caveat, some of the components that I'm showing here are still under development, but a lot of what I am showing here is already in production, and internal users are using it, as well as some beta external users. And I will show two examples of each. Again, all of the components in red contain some form of machine learning. Here, I'm going to give you a actual practical and direct piece of advice. If you are working on these types of systems, once you're doing it at scale with many, many thousands of documents, how do you chunk the documents, index them, and how do you relate that to the prompts that users are going to ask you? It's a very tough problem, and it requires a lot of iteration. Why does it require a lot of iteration? Financial data is very similar. Even if you're looking at different industries or you're looking at different companies and entities, a lot of what they report on is similar. Continuing with the example of public companies will report revenue metrics, they will report income, they will report on costs, and they all have to report this. Why? Because the SEC requires them to report it if they are in the US. As a user, I can come in and I can ask a very pointed and detailed question, but many users come in and they ask very vague questions. So this piece here that says prompt management is actually very complex and very involved. There's a series of machine learning steps that are happening here where we're taking the user's prompt and we're running a classifier on it so that we understand what's the actual intent of the question. If it's a vague question, I really want to understand what the question is trying to get at, so I provide the right information. I also need to understand, out of all of these documents, am I looking at information that is very recent, and making sure that the data that I provide the user is not stale is one of the top requirements for this system at Fitch. Because you can imagine if I'm Pedro and I'm asking a question about last year's financial performance, and this tool gives me the answer to the question I'm asking, but it's giving me for the year 2022, then it's not really giving me the correct information. Even though it's addressing the question that I'm asking, it's addressing it for a wrong period in time. So if you're going to run these kinds of systems in production with live data, where would I recommend that you spend the most time in the current state of AI? It's in these two components right here. Obviously, at Fitch, guardrails are extremely important because we can't serve the user's information that is inappropriate. We can't serve the user's information that is incorrect. And also, we have to make sure that a model doesn't try to provide the financial advice that a financial manager would provide. At Fitch, we're in the business of credit ratings. We're not financial managers. We're not investors, so we can't provide that type of advice. Lastly, sorry, before I move along, for large language models, we use pretty much the gamma of them. Right now, a lot of the processes are running on well-known models like OpenAI. We have Mistral, we have Claude, etc. We are now starting to hit the point where we're asking ourselves, does it make sense to fine-tune some of these models? And if yes, which use case do we prioritize? Okay, quick time check. It looks like I am at about halfway, and I still have about 20% of my presentation to go, so I'll move through this portion quickly. So Fitch GPT and Fitch Genie. I'll show RDR Genie first. So RDR Genie, what I'm showing here, I am purposely blocking a very large portion of the page because this is information that is IP from Fitch, and this is for paid customers. If you're a customer of Fitch Ratings Pro, or if you work at Fitch and you happen to have access to the platform, then you can use Fitch Genie. Fitch Genie it's your typical chatbot assistant. It is a research assistant, and if you are internal, if you're Pedro, you can use this to help you in the process of getting the information that you need to publish your insights. So I've already gone ahead and pre-populated it with some of these questions. Here I got the answers. And just to show you that this is live and is not vaporware or anything like that, I unintentionally actually made a mistake here in my next question. This is what I wanted to ask, but I copied some other stuff from the answer. And the bot came back at me and said, I'm sorry, I can't answer that particular question with the document set that I have. If you think about it, it makes sense because there are hundreds of thousands of documents here, and it's taking these questions that I'm asking, it's vectorizing them, and then it's trying to find the relevant documents that would answer the questions. Here I've added a little bit of irrelevant information. So what happened was I copied the relevant part of it, and this is a question that I created. This is not a pre-made question. Now I ask the question again, and it does provide me with an appropriate answer, and it gives attribution, and I'm not gonna open this document because it's very recent, so it might have information that hasn't made it to its way through to public knowledge yet, but this one is from about 8 months ago. And you can see here, it provides attribution, and if I keep scrolling down, it'll show me where the answer is coming from. So this one, like I said, it's external facing, it's in beta, so it's limited to users right now, but it's fully running in production with live actual Fitch data. This one is internal. This is one that anyone within Fitch can use, and it's only open to Fitch staff. The thing I want to show for this one is we have pre-populated it already with some knowledge bases, and if you click on one of these, what you'll see is that the prompt is already generated to fit a particular persona. And one of the things that I mentioned before is the prompt management for these types of systems is very important. And that's something that I'll be very happy to take questions on at the end, because I also have some side projects outside of Fitch where I'm looking at specifically how do prompts affect the responses of LLMs, and also what are some of the easiest ways to introduce people who are new to these types of systems to appropriate prompting. And then here, I'm just going to click on one of these because we're running short on time, but I can please provide 5 ideas for my weekend barbecue. One of the things about this system is that I can do a general knowledge base. I don't have to ask HR questions. And if I do a general knowledge base, of course, it will answer generally. Why do we need to provide a general knowledge base? You ask. Well, because again, Fitch is regulated, so we can't use Gemini or OpenAI or some of the vendor models out of the box, because they keep your data, they keep the prompts that you ask, and we cannot risk any Fitch data leaving Fitch systems. So yeah, here, if anybody wants some suggestions for this weekend's barbecue, let me know and I'll put them in the chat. All right, moving along. So finally, we've given Pedro a way to do research and analysis, and now he gets to the bit that's really important to Fitch, publishing, because if we don't publish, we don't sell. This is what our customers want to buy. They want to get those financial insights. Content generation, how are we helping Pedro publish faster? One caveat that I'll mention is, out of everything that I've shown today, the content generation piece is the one that it's more new. So a lot of what I'm showing here right now, it's running in a dev and a QA environment. It still has not been released to production, but I will show some demos that are with live data, real data. They're just data that are in the QA environment and still not available to anybody who has access to the production environment. Okay, again, everything shown in red is a component that uses machine learning. Similar to data extraction. Here, you'll see we have identified some initial use cases to work on, and there is a large variety of input data. We're getting some data directly from Fitch systems, from the database. We are getting some data from PDFs. We even get some data that is sent to analysts via email. And so depending on how the data comes in, we might have to do some pre-processing. Once we get that pre-processing, we do RAG, we do retrieval augmented to get the context. Similar to the research assistant, we have to enrich, we have to chunk and embed and index the data. Now, the difference here is this is not open domain. We don't give the user the ability to ask any and all questions that they want around the data. Instead, we have some very specific workflows, and each of those workflows has a series, a chain of prompts that provides prompts and logic, because there's also some logic that doesn't go directly into an ML model. And those chains are the ones that provide the final output. The output can take many forms. Again, because this is still early stage, these are some of the ones that we're focusing on, but the long-term goal of this project is to be able to help Pedro write any form of content for any type of Fitch data that he wants. And then, of course, at the end, even though I'm not explicitly showing the feedback mechanism and the feedback loop in this diagram, you will see in a minute how this is still a hybrid component, because I'm doing production monitoring. I'm also doing monitoring of the outputs themselves. And as you're going to see in a minute, I am providing the user feedback mechanism and a way to tell me and to tell the AI, is this answer correct? And if it's not correct, how can we improve it? So as I go through these, let me check some of the questions, because now I do see questions in the chat. So I'm just going to select a few. Have you had success with serving proprietary analysis approaches to ML and have it perform then? If you have, has it been through prompt engineering training or fine tuning? Great question. That is actually the one part that we haven't done yet for 2 reasons. As I said, we want to focus on a hybrid approach. So we always want to have the human as part of the system. The thing that humans do very, very well is the research and analysis component. The reason they do it well is because they are taking pieces of information from different places that may not be available to the machine learning models. Now, that doesn't mean it's not going to be a focus in the future. It's just a more complex problem to solve. And because we have lower hanging fruit, we've decided to focus on the lower hanging fruit before we tackle the analytical piece. Number two, the ratings piece, as I said, is regulated, and there are some very specific regulations around how the analysis is done that before we provide solutions to these other problems, it's not really worth it to try to tackle that piece and try to navigate the regulatory concerns for that. Hopefully that answered the questions. I'll pick two more, or one more if it's a long answer. Can you give an example of the kinds of documents you use on the web crawler to find? Yes, I can. I actually showed one example, 10Q. So any type of document that a company has to submit per SEC requirements, so 10Qs, 10Ks, all the different nomenclature of documents. If you go on the SEC website and you go on SEC EDGAR, you see all of the different types of documents that companies submit. For SEC, we don't use a web crawler because they provide an API. But other countries around the world have similar entities that prescribe what type of financial data needs to be provided, and they don't necessarily have robust APIs that you can query. Also, some companies choose to submit additional information that is relevant to our analysts via their own company websites instead of through the SEC, for example. And so, yeah, those are examples of documents that we find with the web crawler. And then are all the models you use language-based? No, they're not. Some models are vision models. So if we have images in the documents, we might have to identify what's in the image. But the majority of the models are language-based. Yes, we deal primarily with text and textual-based information. So it's either classical NLP or, of course, more recently, large language models. I do have some more questions, but I'll leave those towards the end. So demo for content generation. I will try to walk through this one quickly. Let me give you actual live data first. Where is my actual live data? Okay, so yes, here. Bear with me for a minute, and because this one's already pre-populated. Let me grab a different one. So if I take this is not the UI because like I said, this project is relatively new. This is just a bare bones UI that we're using to check that we're giving the analysts and our stakeholders so that they can check the information coming in from the back end. I'm going to put in a different company in here. So you were looking at CVS. This is Apple. This over here is all publicly available information. On the right is text that we're generating, but right now I'm doing it for an older quarter, so this is not any kind of proprietary information. So right now it's running through that whole series of machine learning models that I showed you earlier, and that's why it takes some time because it has to run many calculations. So it's giving me the data, and I can see all of the data to make sure that it's correct, and I could go back and verify it against my database. And now it's running through the content generation piece. That part does use a language model, and right now we're in the middle of the workday, so the language model is probably getting hit pretty hard, which is why it's taking a little bit longer to respond. But in about 5 or 10 seconds, hopefully, I should be able to see some content that's generated here. Okay, so yeah, here I see some content, it's generated. This is, like I said, what we're starting with, but we're aiming to provide automation for most of the reports that this particular team of analysts writes, which are usually about anywhere from 4 to 8 pages. What does this look like, or what will it look like when I can use it in an actual UI? I'm gonna run through this very quickly because Again, I'm short on time, but I could log in. I can select an entity, and once I select that entity, again, it will pre-populate that data that you just showed, that I just showed you. It'll populate some content, and then the really interesting piece, I can also see the source. I can go ahead and regenerate if I want to, and then if I regenerate, I can either copy it to the clipboard and use it on whatever documents I want to use. This is the piece that I wanted to get to. This is the human in the loop component. I can provide feedback. If I like the output, I can basically, oh no, sorry, these are settings. That was my bad. This is for regeneration. Let me take you to the feedback piece. So here I can provide feedback. And again, that's very important because number one, the model needs to know what part is it getting wrong. And if it's getting one of those parts wrong, we can dynamically change the prompt. Also, the team of data scientists, the team of machine learning engineers needs to understand if something is being consistently rated low, we need to take a look at it. And we need to provide some kind of change to improve that part of the system. So all of this is hybrid. Lastly, let me scroll through a little bit quicker because I want to show you this piece. We're also going to allow you to change the data. If any number is wrong or you have to update the number because of some other information that you have, we're going to allow you to change the number. Now you as a user can see what have you changed. And then if you edit the text itself, we're also going to show you what you edited. And that's available to the model later so that it knows if there's something that you changed for a particular reason, it can update to those preferences that you as a user have. So again, this is the beauty of having the hybrid model or the hybrid approach. Here I'm just showing a couple of examples of what this might look like. This is the one that I showed live, but we're also generating structured data from unstructured data. These are two examples with different use cases. And then this is one example where we have very, very, very long documents and we want to do summarization on those documents, but the summarization includes very specific data points that we need to look at. So if people on the call have used something like ChatGPT before, ChatGPT can summarize very well, but sometimes it'll leave out specific components or specific bits that were important to you. We can't afford to do that because we have to abide by the thing that needs to get published. So we can't just run a language model. We have to run some data extraction pieces first, identify which ones are important, and then feed those to the language model to make sure that it is included in the final output. All of this is a series of machine learning models. We're finally getting towards the end. I just wanted to show you a little bit of business value statistics. Why do I show you business value? As data scientists, if you're working in a corporate setting, if you're not providing value to the business, you're not doing your job correctly. That's the primary function of a data scientist in a business setting. So some cool figures so far. For the document sourcing and data extraction that we've done, we have saved approximately 50,000 hours per year. So you can think about that. That's about 25 extra people that this team now has that can work on something else, because it used to take them on average about 4.5 hours to process one of these documents. Now it takes about 45 minutes to an hour. So 3.5 hours for about 15 to 20% of all the documents that get processed every year via Fitch. Suddenly now you have an extra 25 or so people on staff. 15%, like I said, of the documents have been automated via this hybrid approach. On the content generation workflow, even with this very, very brand new stage that we're working on right now, which is relatively limited compared to the long-term goal that we want to get to, we're estimating that we can save those particular teams of around 900 hours per year. And then just some internal metrics for our own internal research assistants. About 70% of the Fitch solutions side of Fitch Group, which is approximately 700 out of 1,000 employees, are weekly active users of these research assistants. And we have, on average, about 10,000 prompts per week just on that Fitch Solutions side. So if you look at the average per user, that's about 15 prompts that the weekly active users are each asking every single week. Obviously, some people only ask one or two, some people are power users. And this number in particular is not the meaningful thing. It's the trend in this number. This is what we want to see to continue to rise and continue to go up. Okay, lastly, recap. What did we talk about today? We walked you through a week in the life of Pedro at Fitch Group, and we showed you how machine learning models and data science are helping Pedro do his work faster. So we started with financial document sourcing, and we looked at some, although not as interesting as everything else, some definite cases where machine learning is providing value. We saw data extraction, which right as of now, it's probably the biggest savings within all of Fitch that have been achieved via machine learning. Research and analysis, where we are providing a lot of functionality using language models and also using some proprietary custom trained machine learning models to help you do that research and analysis faster. And then lastly, the piece that we're working on right now, which is the publishing and how can we automate that content generation. Okay, before I finish, if you go back to that question that I asked you in the beginning, more of a philosophical approach, I asked you to think about technology and where are we headed? Do you think we're going to continue with this hybrid approach? And I just want to show this diagram to provide a little bit of basis for my argument, which is at the very end, we see ChatGPT, which was obviously a big breakthrough in an AI-driven product. But something that happens is when people see these big breakthroughs, they think that the next one is coming right away. And the reason I put together this historical chart here is if you look at pivotal leaps in the technology world, you see that they happen roughly once a decade. The really, really big leaps that really change the world and really change how humans use technology, they happen about once a decade. So even if in the future we're going to have general intelligence or super intelligence, is it 2 years away? Is it 8 years away? Is it even further than that? Regardless, my opinion is, for now, the hybrid approach is the way to go, and making sure that you can find ways of integrating your user into the machine learning system is what's going to really deliver true business value for you and for your companies. And lastly, I love this quote. It's tough to make predictions, especially about the future. So maybe I'm wrong. Maybe we will have artificial super intelligence next year. Who knows? But with that, I will now open it up fully to Q&A.